Francesco Forgione, better known as Padre Pio, sits at the center of thousands of contested historical anomalies. He is a historical focal point where medical mysteries and intense devotion intersect. The problem with evaluating these claims is how they are typically treated. Devotional writers often accept a half-century of folklore without question. On the other side, skeptics frequently dismiss surviving, documented medical anomalies out of hand. Neither approach is historically rigorous. To get a clearer picture, we need a strict framework. We are going to evaluate 8 lifetime claims attributed to Pio, and every single one starts here, at an absolute neutral baseline, where a natural explanation and a supernatural one are equally probable. From this 50% mark, crowd size and popular belief do not matter. The needle will only move based on the epistemic weight of the evidence, things like physical paper trails, hostile witness testimony, and biological base rates. Strip away 50 years of folklore, apply a rigorous filter, and let the verifiable evidence dictate the final probability. Curious. We begin with File 1, the Wanda Półtawska healing. In November 1962, a 41-year-old mother of 4 was diagnosed with an intestinal mass, presumed to be malignant. 11 days later, just before her scheduled surgery, the tumor vanished. This case left behind the most substantial paper trail of Pio's life, 2 surviving Latin letters, written by the man who requested the intercession, Bishop Karol Wojtyła, the future Pope John Paul II. But apply the skeptical filter. The primary diagnosis was presumptive. No tissue biopsy was ever performed to confirm malignancy. Półtawska herself, a trained psychiatrist, told her doctors there was a 5% chance the initial diagnosis was simply mistaken. The verdict for File 1. The documentation pushes the needle up, but the lack of a confirming biopsy acts as a hard cap. The posterior settles at 62%. Compare that to File 2, the Damiani Bilocation. In 1941, an archbishop in Uruguay was awakened in the night by a Capuchin friar, instructing him to attend to a dying colleague. The archbishop is a high-status witness, but the story was not publicized until 8 years after the event. Combine that massive delay with the known perceptual biases of a half-awakened state in a dark hallway, and the credibility drops rapidly. The verdict for File 2? A single human memory cannot overcome those structural flaws. The needle falls to 40%. The disparity in these scores comes down to documentation. The presence of a verifiable record shifts the probability in a way that singular testimony cannot. This dynamic becomes vital when we look at the environment surrounding Pio. The massive Casa Sollievo della Sofferenza Hospital in San Giovanni Rotondo, set against the backdrop of the Second World War, created the perfect breeding ground for rumors. Consider File 3, the Flying Monk. Allied pilots allegedly saw a figure in the sky, causing their bombs to fail and halting air raids. The story claims this led USAAF General Nathan Twining to convert to Catholicism. We can verify this. Twining wrote a detailed memoir. The military kept extensive, declassified mission reports. Across all those archives, there is 0 record of a mission over the town, no mention of a monk, and no Catholic conversion. The verdict for File 3. The claim collapses entirely into wartime legend, 15%. We see a similar problem with medical claims.
File 4 examines Gemma di Giorgi, who reportedly saw perfectly despite a severe structural eye defect. File 7 looks at Giovanni Savino, a construction worker whose sight was restored after his right eye was destroyed by dynamite. Both cases feature striking visual outcomes and a long list of surviving witnesses, yet both lack the ultimate proof. There are no modern, peer-reviewed ophthalmological case reports or primary hospital charts available to verify the exact pathology. The verdicts. The outcomes are highly unusual, but without clinical data, the scores are capped. Gemma lands at 45%, Savino at 55%. The fog of war applies to messy, undocumented hospital wards just as much as military campaigns. Without clinical data, even the most miraculous-looking recoveries cannot escape the natural margin of error. Now we open File 5, Reading Souls. Across 5 decades, penitents consistently claimed Pio possessed extraordinary knowledge of their undisclosed sins in the confessional. The volume of witnesses is enormous, but the phenomenon is structurally unfalsifiable. In an environment of tens of thousands of confessions a year, the statistical hits, lucky guesses, cold reading, recognizing common patterns, are heavily evangelized. The misses are simply forgotten.
The verdict: the sheer volume cannot overcome the inherent bias structures of the reporting. The needle stays exactly where it started, 50%. We find a similar pattern in File 6, the odor of sanctity. Hostile, skeptical investigators swore they smelled a distinct floral scent emanating from Pio, but Pio fasted heavily, which produces sweet-smelling ketosis, and he admitted to chronic use of iodine, which has a sharp chemical odor. That combination creates a highly plausible natural composite. The verdict for File 6: highly attested but naturally replicable, 60%. File 8 examines prophetic statements. Pio supposedly predicted the 1963 election of Pope Paul VI and specifically told Karol Wojtyła he would ascend to the papacy. There is a fatal flaw in this claim. Pope John Paul II repeatedly and explicitly denied ever receiving that prophecy, making the entire story a classic case of retrospective attribution. The verdict for File 8: devastated by the primary subject's own denial, 20%. Phenomena tied to human psychology, visions, sense, and selective memories are uniquely vulnerable. The devout human mind naturally desires to find profound patterns even where none exist. This chart shows all 8 of our case files aligned by their final probability scores. As you can see, the evidentiary landscape around Padre Pio is exceptionally uneven, ranging from a 15% debunked legend to a 62% documented medical anomaly. Run through a neutral Bayesian stress test, the vast majority of famous Padre Pio narratives dissolve into cognitive bias, suggestion, and folklore. Yet this rigorous scrubbing performs a vital function. It isolates a genuine signal. The handful of cases anchored in physical documents and hostile attestation survive the scrutiny. They remain stubbornly, genuinely anomalous. In the investigation of the supernatural, the size of a devoted crowd is a terrible proxy for the truth. The most compelling evidence never relies on the volume of the believers. It is always found in the quiet, surviving paper trails.